In this lesson, you will learn to specify sample spaces and events for random experiments. Now, as we begin our conversation, we need to first define our terms. So the first term to define is a random experiment. A random experiment is one in which you do not necessarily get the same outcome when you repeat it under the same conditions. So for example, flipping a coin or rolling a die, it does not matter how many times you flip or roll a die, you will get or could get different outcome every time. Okay, so that would be a random experiment. Sample space is the set of all the possible outcomes of a random experiment. So if you roll a die, the sample space would be a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6. That is all the possible outcomes. If you flip a coin, your sample space would be heads or tails. There's only 2 outcomes that are possible with that sample space. Next, we have the term event. An event is any subset of possible outcomes for an experiment. So the whole rolling a die example, there are 6 possibilities in your sample space. It could be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6. Now, if you wanted to roll, say, a 4 through 6, so something bigger than 3, that event would consist of any of those numbers, 4, 5, and 6. So that would be your subset of all the possible outcomes, is that one event of rolling greater than a 3. So now showing you what I just stated, example 1, we'd have heads or tails if a coin is tossed. So the sample space, we would write it with braces. So we can have H be for heads and T for tails. We use the little braces around it to show that we have a sample space. For example 2, the sample space of rolling a die would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6. And you put the braces around it to show that we have a sample space. Now events would be something like you roll a die twice and get a 4 and a 3. That would be considered an event. Okay, that happened. If you roll a die and get a 4, this is also an event. But in this case, since there is only one element in the sample space, this is called a simple event. So if you flip a coin once and get heads, that is also a simple event, where it consists of only one event happening. So using the die example again, if you roll a die and you're told to specify the sample space for the experiment, we already said it would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6. Okay, that is all the possible outcomes. And if I wanted the event that a number greater than 2 results, we would have the possibilities of 3, 4, 5, or 6. So for events as well, we'd also put the braces around the numbers. Okay, so for sample space or events, we can put the braces around to signify what our options are. Now the event that an odd number results would be 1, 3, or 5, so we put those in braces as well. Another example, looking at a 2 dice experiment, specify the sum of the numbers showing on the 2 dice equaling 7. So what are all the possible ways that we can get 7 when you add the 2 dice together? Well, it could be a 1 and a 6, it could be a 2 and a 5, 3 and 4, 5 and 2, 6 and 1. So notice how we put the parentheses around the individual event when you have more than one number happening for the event. So here, this one event consists of 2 parts, the 1 and the 6. Here we have a 2 and a 5, 3 and a 4, etc. So we use parentheses to represent that we have multiple numbers as part of that event, and then the brace is still around showing what are all the possibilities within that event. Now, using the same scenario, when you're rolling 2 dice together, we're next asked to show what events or what possible events do we have where the first die shows a 5. Well, if the first die shows a 5, the second die can be anything. It can be a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or a 6. So here we see that if the first die is a 5, the second die could be a 1, could be a 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6. So these would be all of the possibilities. So we have used the example of a die and of a coin, but it can also include other possibilities as well. So for example, here we have the letters A, B, C, D, E, F, and G written on a separate card. The cards are then shuffled and one card is drawn. You are then to specify the sample space for this experiment. Well, the sample space are all the possible outcomes. And all the possible outcomes would be any of those letters. So you'd write that in braces with all of the letters inside of the braces. And then you're asked to specify the event that a vowel is drawn. Well, from the sample space, we only have the letters A and E that are vowels. So what we do is we'd write A and E inside of the braces.